Welcome back to Count Me In. I'm your host, Adam Larson, and today I'm excited to be joined by Bill Koefoed, Chief Financial Officer at OneStream. We're digging into the rapidly evolving world of AI in finance, especially how it's revolutionizing financial forecasting and reshaping what it means to work in accounting and finance today. Bill shares his perspective on early adoption of AI, why transparency matters, and how these tools can actually make finance roles more engaging and strategic. We also touch on the essential skills the next generation of finance professionals will need and how leaders can foster a culture of innovation. Let's get started. Well, Bill, we're very excited to have you on the podcast today as we're going to be talking about AI and financial forecasting. And I figured a good place for us to start would be, how is AI currently being leveraged in finance, particularly in stuff like demand forecasting?
Yeah, I mean, demand forecasting is a great use case particularly for machine learning, the more quantitative aspects of AI. In today's uncertain world, people need more information. They need to be able to do more scenario planning. And candidly, the stakes are as high as it's ever been, because if you miss a forecast, either too high or too low, it's real money. And we found a number of our customers have been receiving better forecasts, and they've been doing it in substantially less time leveraging AI. And that's really a great opportunity. And I think we're just at the early stages of that.
So we're at the early stages at it. And do you think that it'll be prohibitive of people adopting it? Because, sometimes when something's in an early stage, especially of a technology, they're not so keen on trusting it, especially something like an artificial intelligence. You're like, should I put all my eggs in one basket kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say two things about that. One is there's a lot of hype around AI right now, generally, and I think that there's been some important use cases there. I mentioned one, obviously, using things like generative AI for helping developers do a better job in terms of writing code has been a pretty good ROI associated with it. And clearly call centers have also been, I think that path is well worn, and certainly it is within our company. But I think to your point, it kind of begs the question of like, how transparent are you in the AI, inputs and outputs? And it's one of the things that we've really focused on, is rather than just having a black box like some companies have, which really scares data scientists because they can't trust, like, you press a button and out comes a number, and you're like, I don't know how that came about. We really expose the inputs and the outputs, and for us, we basically run this concept of a model arena where we let different models kind of compete against each other, such that you get the best answer, and that could change obviously over time. But we give all that transparency to our customers, and they want that. If you don't have that transparency, to your point, you're gonna really struggle to get adoption of your AI capabilities.
So what are some other examples of, how AI has kind of made a significant impact, things like maybe like allocation of resources within an organization or other elements that you've seen?
Well, I mean, I mentioned a couple, obviously, with our developers and with contact centers. I mean, I think you're going to see it even more broadly utilized as I think people get more comfortable with use cases. There's another dynamic, obviously, is that you don't want proprietary information kind of in the public domain. And so making sure that you've got, like OneStream is a book of record for most of our customers, if not all of them. And you don't want, this is the information that's going to Wall Street. So you don't want that obviously out in the public domain. So how do you actually take in, LLM models, use them within your environment, and then be able to look at, as a finance person, today, I'd love to look at, revenue by geography, how much marketing spend I've given, and I want to do it by period. I can go do that today, but I'm going to have some analysts that are basically kind of wrangling and untangling data to figure that out. Whereas, this is going to be a perfect use case of saying like, hey, I want my AI agent to be able to tell me that, and I want to be able to do that in a fast time. And the other thing is, obviously, I think we're all looking at whether the data is actually accurate.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to improve over time. And so I think there's going to be some interesting use cases. I get asked sometimes, how's it going to impact finance employment as an example? And I think it's actually going to really supercharge finance. Some 22-year-old that's graduating from college doesn't want to spend all their time just like sifting through data, putting it in a spreadsheet. They want to use their brain. And this is going to give them a lot more of an opportunity to get all the information that they need to be able to make better decisions. And I think that's going to actually be really exciting for the kind of accounting and finance profession.
Well, yeah, especially as, when 20 years ago, when somebody's coming out of college, going in the finance profession, a lot of things that those people were doing are handled by things like AI now. So it's going to change the landscape of accounting education.
Well, for sure. And I think part of the issue that faces the profession today is that there's less people going into the profession because they don't want to, you can decide I want to go into accounting, or I want to go into investment banking, or I want to go, into law or some other profession. And I think part of that was just because they felt in the accounting profession that they weren't, that it was just a bunch of, number crunching, shall we say. Whereas I think this is going to give them an ability to have a much more enriching job, and one where they can add a lot more value to the company that they work for. And hopefully that'll turn the tide a little bit in terms of, more people going into the profession. But certainly it's a challenge that we've been facing here over the last few years.
So for people who are in the profession, how can they upskill to be at the cutting edge? Because, obviously what we were doing before isn't going to work. What we're doing in the future, technology is constantly changing, and they don't want to fall behind.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that, being, having an insatiable curiosity and really embracing AI rather than being kind of nervous about it, I think would be the advice that I would have. Go learn more about it, try it. Go on something like ChatGPT and try different solutions and questions, and just get more familiar with how it works, because there are some nuances and how you ask the question and what kind of data you provide and all that. There's application. I ended up using the first time I used it, I used it for writing a job description for a new hire that I was doing. But the more you get more comfortable with it, Microsoft obviously has Copilot that they make pretty easily available, and use it and try it and explore. And as you do more, then you'll get more comfortable with it and you'll get better at it.
So you mentioned, you've been using it in your daily life to, like to help with things like writing job descriptions. I know people help with their emails. Are there other ways that you've seen, especially people within the finance and accounting function, utilize it for day-to-day tasks, maybe even help just make their jobs more efficient?
Yeah. Well, certainly it kind of borders between kind of legal and finance, but
Yeah.
being able to go look in contracts for specific amount for specific amounts and or information, if you can put those all into your LLM models, it'll help give you more insights. You can certainly do the similar process and look at trends that you have around, pricing, and or packaging and or demand. I mean, there's so many opportunities for finance people to be able to use it just to get more insights into their customer trends. In addition to that, things like account reconciliation and transaction matching are clearly an opportunity to better utilize, again, a little bit more on the quantitative side, to be able to use AI and again make their jobs more efficient, more effective, more useful. The list goes on, and I probably haven't even contemplated other opportunities for how people are using them, but it's a really exciting time, and as I said, I think it's going to be enriching for the profession.
Now, I wanted to touch on something you mentioned earlier about transparency. As you were saying, how you guys make sure you're transparent and open with how the AI is being used and the assessment there. How important is it for organizations to have their own policies around AI, especially with organizations you work with?
I think it's really important. Again, particularly, I mean, your financial information is kind of the keys to your kingdom, right? I mean, it's the most proprietary, or one of the most proprietary assets that you have, especially if you're a public company. And so, we obviously take security very seriously. And so I think it's really important that as you start thinking about, the AI tools that you want to use, you do it in the context of your security environment and make sure that it's consistent with that environment and that you're protecting your information.
Yeah, definitely, because it's one of those things where anybody with a connection to an internet can access an AI application, and what are you putting into that? What does that AI application have access to? And how are you utilizing it? And I suppose that's why a lot of folks, when they're working with software, different softwares that they're working with, a lot of times those softwares have included some sort of an LLM within their platforms to help, utilize the functionality just within a safe environment.
No, I think that's right. I mean, and I think, whether it's us or ServiceNow or some of the other, big software companies, I think you're seeing that trend pretty consistently applied, that you're using AI within the context of the software provider.
Have you guys run into any around the conversations around ethics within the AI platforms? It's different types of biases that can get introduced when looking at different number forms. How have you guys addressed those kind of problems?
Yeah, we've been a little bit more oriented on quantitative AI
Okay.
than some of those issues, shall we say. And certainly on the LLM side, I think they exist a little bit more.
Yeah.
But I think, our sweet spot, given that we are a financial software company and particularly around numbers, again, there clearly can be errors if we tend to be more focused on the quantitative side.
hmm Okay. Now, how important is it to have the human side of an AI? You have the AI, but a lot of times people say you also need the HI, the human intelligence, to kind of come together. How have you as an organization been able to utilize the human side to make sure that the AI is doing what it needs to do, and then also because we want to trust the numbers that are coming out, but obviously at some point somebody has to check things to make sure things are still on the right track.
Well, I mentioned a couple of these things previously. I mean, I think transparency really matters so
Yeah.
that you can get people to trust your data. Again, to the extent that it's accessing and finding data and being able to um, expose that data to humans, I think again that saves people a ton of time. I mean, just using on the developer side, we have a lot of developers that are using it on the LLM side. I know I'm going back and forth a little bit between AI and ML, but on the developer side, like they love it. It makes them more productive. They have to spend less time writing code, and they can leverage code that's been done before. That I think it gets a little bit back to my earlier comment about just trust
hmm
and we love the word supercharging, but I think at least in today's world, I think AI has a really great opportunity to help supercharge humans. And I think that, like I said earlier, I think that'll enrich people's work, their lives, and again, the productivity of the people that are leveraging it.
Do you think that as we look at how AI is being interspersed within, especially the finance and accounting community, do you think that the lack of people coming into it, less people are coming into those jobs? Do you think the fact that AI is helping will take an will take account for that less people coming into the industry?
Well, certainly it will make people more productive. And so I
Okay.
think that will be quite a good benefit or positive benefit. I also think that, again, to the extent that it makes people's jobs more enriching, I think you could find more people entering the profession, and you could see that trend, that trend ticking up, from where it's been.
hmm
I mean, from the days when I graduated from college, I started my career in public accounting. I reference, sometimes investors ask me like, why is consolidation hard? And back when I used to do it, I used to have this, yellow paper, and you used to have a column, which is entity A, and then you'd have a column that's entity B, and you had to eliminate all the transactions between A and B, and you had to do it all in yellow paper. And, I had this, like, for big companies, I had this like yellow paper all taped together. But, in today's world, you don't have to do that. And so you can leverage your brain more, and you can be more impactful in the work that you've done. We did a study called Finance 2035
hmm
that we released I don't know 4 or 5 months ago, and one of the things that we found is that particularly for public companies, that people expect the CFO and his or her organization to be more strategic over the next decade. The role of the CFO being a backward looking reporter of information. Those days are over. You're seeing the CFO role being, helping a CEO look around corners. And the data that we found from our Finance 2035 study really showcased that this is something that CEOs are expecting from CFOs, that investors are expecting from CFOs, that owners are expecting from CFOs, and I think that AI just really helps accelerate that trend because the CFO is really an important role and can help really impact shareholder value for the companies that they run.
Yeah. Well, we've seen that trend, especially in the role of the CFO is constantly changing, and it's evolving even more. That business partner, that person with the seat at the table, who's not just coming with a bunch of spreadsheet, was actually coming with no information, and it's super important. How have you been able, as a CFO, been able to help your team and guide your team with all these constant changes, especially within technology?
You you really have to embrace it, and you have to, I love to ski, and I'm very much of an advocate of, like, if you don't fall down, you're not trying hard enough. You're not really trying to improve. You're not trying to improve. Like, I can go through a whole day and not fall, and I do try. I do try not to fall, but you have to push your capabilities, and I think as a finance organization, it's one of these funny organizations that you have to be right. I mean, the numbers have to be right. They have to be right when you
Of
report them
course.
to Wall Street. But the process of getting to right doesn't always have to be right in every part of the journey. And you have to be willing to try new things, and you have to be willing to explore. We ended up we use Microsoft as our tech platform for OneStream, and I take all my Microsoft data and I take all my revenue data, and we've created this process to create gross margin by customer, but we didn't get it right the first time. And a variety of different reasons on why we didn't do it, but you just got to keep trying, and you got to reward people for innovation and for trying, and at the end of the day, the numbers do need to be right.
Yeah.
But the process of getting more insight and making you smarter and better and more strategic, I think, is a really important one. And I think it's a culture that as a CFO, you really have to perpetuate, and that's how you create great teams. That's how the teams perform. That's how they accelerate. And at the end of the day, hopefully, I'm also a big believer that work should be fun, and I try to make it that way.
Well, I like what you said, the first time you didn't get it right. And I think a lot of times, especially in the finance function, you don't want to not get things right, because if you get something wrong, like let's say you missed a zero, that zero could have huge consequences. So how do you create the space to maybe not get it right the first time, but also, hey, we want to get the numbers correct as well?
You really have to create a learning culture.
Mhm.
I think one of our board members is General Petraeus, who ran both both the Iraq and Afghan war. He was the 4-star general that was in charge. He makes it's fun being in board meetings with him, because he's got a lot of really interesting phrases. But one of them is, like, team who learns the fastest wins, because you don't always go into a situation knowing the answer, or even the answer that you think when you start may change, but you have to learn, and you have to learn the fastest. And I was really lucky. I worked for Microsoft for 10 years, and I think that was part of their culture was fail fast, and and learn from it, and iterate. And I think as a CFO, you have to do that, because we have to learn, we have to get smarter, and the more strategic you are, you've got to really embrace that.
Yeah, you really do. And I like that. I like that mindset. And I think it could go far especially for keeping high performing talent, because you don't want people to come in and just kind of get bored or get overwhelmed by all the work that they have on them. You want them to excel and to be innovative.
No, for sure. I also, if my team's listening to your podcast, they're going to probably start laughing. But sometimes, when we finish our monthly report, I just kind of, riff on whatever's kind of top of mind, so that you can, I want I want everybody in my team, I want everybody in my organization to know what problems I'm trying to solve, what are the things that I'm worried about. Because if you don't do that, then you can't people can't help you if they don't know what your problems you're trying to solve. And so it's really been a fun part, at least fun for me, a fun part of the team to kind of bring everybody along and make sure that everybody's all knows at least what's top of my mind. And I want to know what's top of their mind as well. Certainly they're not always as communicative as I would hope. I do reach out and try to listen, and sometimes that's better just one-on-one than it is in a group setting.
No, I appreciate that. I appreciate that perspective, and I hope that they're enjoying it as much as you are. Because a lot of times it's reflected in the leadership what's happening with the employees as well.
You'll get a bunch of comments on your podcast from my team.
So, just bringing the conversation back around, we've been talking about a lot of different things, especially when it comes to AI within the finance function. Are there different trends or technologies or something that you kind of find exciting? You're like, hey, I can't wait for this to happen. This is going to be really cool, especially, when I implement my team or we implement as an organization.
I do think that as we talked a little bit about earlier about some of the kind of strengths and opportunities around the LLM models. I do think that they're going to continue to get better. I know that they're going to continue to get better.
Of course.
And I do think, back to the example that I gave of, I'd love to look at every CFO would love to get more insight into, hey, if I do this, what happens? Or I did that and what happened? Or are there some trends that I can see that I can replicate, or things that I did that I don't want to do again? Mm-hmm. And I think that the AI is just going to allow you to do that analysis that much faster. Back to my earlier point about he or she who learns fastest wins. I think that AI is going to really help you learn better and faster, and it'll, by definition, I think the AI is going to learn and help to provide some recommendations or some suggestions. If I could ask and say, like, hey, if I spent $1 million more marketing in Europe, would that, how much revenue would that lead to? That would be great. I mean, I can go, we can go try to attempt that analysis, but just the more you're better and smarter, I think it'll be an interesting phenomenon.
Yeah, it will be interesting, especially when it comes to things like forecasting, where you're like, hey, I want to look at the forecast, but you can ask the model saying, hey, compared to the last 20 years of data, what is our next 6 months going to look like? It'll probably be much more accurate than what we're guessing based on, everything in our heads.
Well, and even beyond that, how can I change the forecast, right? What are the levers that I can turn to change the forecast? If I hire more salespeople, or if I spend more money on marketing, or I spend it in France versus Mexico. All those things are what a CFO is thinking about every day.
Yeah.
In terms of like, not just what is the kind of forecast, but like, how can I change it? How can I influence it? I think that's going to be really exciting.
Do you think we're going to see investors kind of looking for, new IPOs, or even people that are investing in and saying, hey, how are you using AI? Is that going to be a question that's going to start being asked, do you think?
We were certainly, we have an AI product, so we were certainly asked about it. And, the question is always like, how are you using it in your own environment?
Yeah.
Because of course, they want to make sure that you're drinking your own champagne or eating your own dog food, whatever term you want to use around that. So I do think that's right. I think, I think investors always want to know kind of what your product vision is. I think efficiency, to some degree, are you using AI to accelerate your product vision? I think would be something that they would clearly be looking at. I think also, like, on the efficiency side, I think that they want to know that they're asking it. It's usually not their first question, but it certainly can come up in the, kind of call it top 5.
Yeah. Bill, I really appreciate your insight, coming on the podcast, sharing all this information, having this conversation, because it's a ever-changing product. I think if we have this conversation 6 months from now, it'll be completely different. And I think that's the exciting thing about new technology, is you can kind of watch it and kind of observe it and see, because it's been around long enough that people are starting to add it to their softwares and add it to their things that people already have access to. So it'll be interesting to see the landscape change as people start to understand how to use it more efficiently.
Look, I think we're in a really fun time for technology companies. It was one of my prior jobs. I was speaking to a group of technology investors, and I said, it must be horrifying to be an investor because literally companies that existed in 25 years ago don't exist today because they've been acquired, or they've been they don't exist for a variety of different reasons. But it's a really fun industry to work in because it's so dynamic. There's so many changing things, and you read the newspaper, you read different articles online, and you learn a lot. I do think that it's energizing as as an employee in the technology industry, as I've been for most of my career.
Again, I just want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Bill. It's been great to have you on here.
Thank you.
This has been Count Me In, IMA's podcast, providing you with the latest perspectives of thought leaders from the accounting and finance profession. If you like what you heard and you'd like to be counted in for more relevant accounting and finance education, visit IMA's website at www.imanet.org.